part 3.5, Arrow, page 217 to 228. Arrow. They take her to what's left of the Parliament building, one of the tallest buildings in town. The men on the hills have hit it with hundreds of shells, set it on fire, then fired hundreds more shells at it. The tower is a target not only because it is a symbol of the government they vow to destroy, but because all of Grabaka is visible from its upper floors. Arrow has always avoided this building, partly because it's an obvious place for a defender to operate out of it, making it a subject of frequent attacks, and partly because it's full of other members of her own army. She's considered it ground already claimed. In the lobby, which is surprisingly undamaged, a man is waiting for her. He stands by the elevator smoking. There are 2 guards stationed at the entrance, but they pay her and her escorts little attention. She walks across the marble floor, past 2 large green potted plants. The higher floors are worse, the man waiting says to her, as though reading her mind. The 3 who have been attached to her like snails to a leaf since this morning nod at the man, satisfied they fulfilled whatever job they were given, and leave. Not the sharpest knives, those 3, the man says after they've gone. He's about her age, no more than 30. He's tall and has a sort of face that looks amused, regardless of the situation, and curly hair. He's wearing a pair of gray overalls and holds a semi-automatic rifle in his hand. "I'm Hassan," he says. "Arrow," she says. She tries not to be taken in by this man's friendliness. "Of course, I've heard of you. I didn't think you existed." He's smiling, and she can't tell whether he's being serious or not. "I don't know what you've heard," she says, "but it's probably not true." "Probably not," he agrees. "Still, it'll be nice for a change to work with someone who knows what they're doing." He puts out his cigarette and opens a door leading to a staircase. "How does 14 strike you?" "Fine," she says. They walk up 14 flights in silence. The stairwell is dark, with the only light available coming in from a small flashlight Hassan holds out in front of him. She can smell smoke. She loses count of their progress, and when they reach the floor, she accidentally bumps into him when he stops to open the door. "Sorry," she says. "No problem." He turns off his flashlight and puts it back into his pocket as they step out of the stairwell. Hassan wasn't joking when he said the upper floors were worse. What isn't burned has been splintered by the shells. There's broken glass, twisted metal, and other unrecognizable debris strewn across the rooms, and the wind blows freely through the missing windows and gaping holes in the outer walls. "Are you ready to go hunting?" he asks, his voice low, no longer as carefree. "No," she says, "I'm not." Hassan steps back, looks at her. "I don't understand. What precisely are we doing here?" She asks the question a little louder than she intends to. "This is an easy one. Colonel Karaman probably just wants to make sure you're as good as they say before giving you anything more difficult. We're moving on into a position. I'm going to select a target, and you'll fire. Easy. You'll do fine." He looks at her expectantly. "Who are we shooting?" Hassan shrugs. "I haven't decided yet. One of them. We'll see who's available." Era wonders how she's ended up here, what she's done to box herself into this corner. She can't think of anything specific, and this irritates her. "This way," Hassan says, and he leads her up the corridor towards the southern end of the building. When they're about 5 meters from the windows, he signals for her to get down, and from there they crawl onto their stomachs. They reach the outer wall, and he points up at the windows and begins to get to his feet. The windows are a meter off the ground and offer no real cover from view. To get a shot, she'd have to stand and fire, making her a target for anyone with a rifle in either Grabaka or the hills above. "No," Arrow says. "There." She points at a hole in the wall about 30 centimeters wide. For a second, she thinks Hassan will refuse, but he agrees, and they crawl to the hole. She positions herself, and Hassan puts down his gun and takes a pair of binoculars out of his overalls. He raises himself up to the window, takes a quick look around, and sinks back down. "This is a good spot," he says. Arrow looks through her scope. Grabaka is a wasteland. She can't find a single structure that doesn't bear the mark of weapons. The streets are barely streets anymore. The pavement is torn apart, littered with mangled cars and pieces of buildings. She sees a few people, but no soldiers. They've learned the sightlines of this building and know not to wander into them. She wonders how they're going to find anyone to shoot. "I used to live there," Hassan says. "You see that red building about 100 meters west of the bridge?" She sees it. It's on the front lines, badly damaged. "It would have been a nice place to live before the war, though. Right on the river. Lots of trees. I was at work when the men on the hills came in their tanks and took over. If I hadn't been, I'd be dead now. They killed my younger brother. He was 12. My father as well. I don't know where my mother and sisters are. All I've been able to find out is that they're not in Gurbaka anymore. Arrow doesn't know what to say. His story is not uncommon. She's not sure if he expects her to say anything. She hopes not. They're probably dead, too. I almost hope they are. Better than that, better that than them forced to live with those monsters. He says this without emotion, as if matter-of-fact frankness that startles her. My father was killed too, she says, surprising herself, in the first battle at the Canton building. Hassan nods. We will make them pay for what they've done to us, to everyone. Arrow doesn't reply, but an uneasy feeling is setting in. There's something about the tone of Hassan's desire for vengeance that unnerves her. She has felt this desire for retribution herself many times, has killed because of it. She can't work out why it's bothering her now. Hassan returns his attention to the window. Arrow looks through her scope, scanning the streets for anything that looks military. It can sometimes be difficult to tell who is a soldier and who isn't. The men on the hills are mostly an irregular force and they don't usually wear uniforms. If they have a gun, they're obviously combatants, but many of them don't always have their weapons visible, or in the case of officers or other senior ranking officials, don't carry anything other than handguns, which are hard to spot from a distance. She's found that a lot can be determined by the way a person moves, how the other people around him move. An officer walks with a swagger and those around defer to him, move out of his way. Soldiers tend to travel in groups, with the lowest ranking one leading the way. Patience is rewarded often by letting one man go by without shooting. Others usually follow. Choosing a target can be a real art. She wonders how Hassan will go about it and whether he will choose well. She knows she is rationalizing, but a principle has been compromised. But she has little choice. And all in all, she can't argue that with these men with guns haven't earned the bullet that will find them. She's the one to deliver it to them. Well, that's just how it will be. She made her choice months ago. It's fortunate, she supposes, that she was able to go for so long without becoming part of the larger machinery of her army. There, Hassan says, I found one. Where? She asks. She can't see anything we're shooting at. 2 o'clock, 50 meters south of the yellow bus. Arrow looks, and just past a burned-out bus, a man is walking up the hill. He's trying to stay close to the buildings, but he's miscalculated the line of sight and is in easy range. But something's wrong about him. He's old, probably in his early 60s, and his clothes are too worn for him to be a soldier. There's no confidence in his walk, nor authority, and he's clearly unarmed. That man's a civilian, she says. He's no soldier. He's our target, Hassan says. I pick who to shoot at, not you. No, she says, he's no good. She searches for another target. Up the road from the old man she sees a small glint, a momentary shine of metal, and then a man takes a step to the right into her line of fire. He moves like a soldier, is smoking a cigarette. He shifts his weight and his rifle becomes visible. It's apparent he's unaware of his vulnerability, has become lazy and inattentive. He's talking to someone she can't see, so he's not alone. There, to the south, there's a soldier. Her finger brushes the trigger. She will give Hassan the courtesy of giving the order, but her mind is already made up. No, Hassan said, forget him. I've made the choice. Fire at my target. Arrow takes her finger off the trigger, looks up at Hassan. I'm not going to kill an unarmed civilian. Hassan turns to her. You'll kill who I tell you to kill. Arrow shakes her head. No. Hassan slides down from the window. What do you think this is, some sort of game? I could ask you the same thing, she says. Fire your weapon. No, I'll kill the soldier. Hassan looks at her, shaking his head. We're not negotiating here. Other people can shoot the soldiers. That's not our job. Arrow takes her hands off of her rifle and turns to get a better view of Hassan. What do you mean? I mean, you're not an ordinary soldier. Colonel Karaman's unit is not just any unit. You kill civilians? He laughs. Sure, we do a lot of things. This is merely a test. One, you are failing. You think that man's an innocent? Answer me this. How is it he's able to walk the streets of Grbaka freely? Why isn't he dead or in a camp or whatever else they do? Arrow knows the answer to this, knows it is because the men on the hills view him as one of their own. That doesn't mean he's one of the men killing us. It doesn't matter. He's one of them. They are his sons. He is their father or grandfather or uncle. They've killed our fathers and grandfathers and uncles. We're better than this. Of course we are. They're rabid animals. Killing them does the world a favor. Arrow thinks about this, wonders how many of the men on the hills she has killed. Their deaths saved lives. She knows this is true. And she knows that she has nothing but contempt for the ones who murder. But they're not all like that. Their mothers and fathers and sisters are not all like that. Some of them are good. Hassan smirks. I've yet to meet one. The city is full of them. And we will deal with those people too in time. What do you mean? She asks. Ask your friend Nerman Filipovic that someday, he says. There are two sides to this war, Arrow, ours and theirs. There is no in between. He returns to the window, focuses his binoculars on the street. He's still there, 15 meters farther south. Take your shot. She folds her hands around the rifle, puts her eye to the scope. She finds the man where Hassan said he would be in Ames. She knows now what she did to begin this course of events. She can pinpoint the moment at which her options began to vanish. The men on the hills told her that she hated them, and they did everything they could to make it true. She did not fight very hard. It was an easy thing to do. She wonders whether it would have been possible to behave any differently. She hopes it is. She hopes that, somewhere in the city, there are people who are resisting the temptation to turn these men into devils, to say that all men are like them, to oppose their very existence the way they always said the people of Sarajevo did. But it's too late for her. There's no way to go back in time, no way to undo what has been done. Her finger rests on the trigger, and she exhales, trying to slow her racing pulse. She looks through the scope, makes a final adjustment in her aim. She sees the sniper they sent to kill the cellist, his eyes closed, his hands at his side. She hears music, and this time she does not fire. No, she says, I won't. She wonders if Hassan will shoot the man himself or he will shoot her, but he makes no move. He turns from the window, watches her pull her rifle away from the hole in the wall, and begin to crawl out of the room. I hope you realize what you're doing, he says. Arrow continues crawling. I know exactly what I'm doing, she says, as she reaches the inner hallway and gets to her feet. She walks to the stairway quickly, but doesn't run. She doesn't put her rifle over her shoulder. She isn't sure she won't need it. The stairway is dark, and she's forced to make her way around to the ground blind. Every sound she hears brings the expectation that Hassan will follow her, but he doesn't. She emerges from the stairway and walks across the lobby toward the rear entrance of the building. The two guards are still there, but again they pay her no attention. Just before she steps through the double doors and into the street, she checks her watch and sees it is almost 4 o'clock. Her feet hit the pavement, and she begins to run.